Hello everybody, this is Pierre Seberin speaking. I'm working at the IEC Central Office at the Technical Department, and I will be presenting this IEC Academy webinar for this morning or this afternoon for people that are already from Asia. And it will be about the standards development process. I hope that everybody can hear me clearly. And so then let's move forward. First of all, let's talk about the main governing principles regarding the way we have to develop standards in the IEC. First of all, one of the main principles is transparency. When I mean transparency, this is about, for example, not starting a development project without having clearly informed all the key members of the technical committee. So no projects should pop up by themselves, and that's the same also regarding the way we move from one stage to the other stage or to the next stage into the process of the development of a software of a project, when we have to really clearly follow the steps and have the proper votes going on and so on. Then another principle is openness. This means that we need to be inclusive and embark into the development process all the stakeholders that are interested into the standard. Also, we need to have impartiality and consensus, so we need to really work to find a consensus agreement efficiency in a way that we have to prepare a work plan for developing the standards, and we have to do our best to stick to the work plan. And the relevance is in fact has to be justified by a market need. The coherence, it is also important to have, and also a last item is to address the needs of the developing countries. So this also is a special request from the United Nations, and in fact these governing principles are provided by the United Nations to all the major the link. So, as a snapshot, let's have a quick look on how globally, not going into details, but globally the principles of the workflow when we do standards development. So the goal is in fact to develop standards. Then on one side we have technical committees, so up to 124 technical committees, for example, in the IEC. On the other side we have countries, and we have at that point 83 member countries. And in each country we have stakeholders that can be industry, users, academia, government, etc. So then in that process we have first all these stakeholders that go to their national committee with requirements saying, well, we need a standard on that subject and so on. And then the national committee is evaluating whether that request is valid, and then is evaluating which technical committee could handle the standardization requirements. And then these national committee, they would send to the appropriate technical committee, they would send requests to develop new standards. This is an NP document. We'll see that later in details. So the national committees will really send the request for new standards to the technical committees. From there, the stakeholders would provide expert resources to write these standards. Once this group is starting to write the standard and they have drafts, then these drafts, they come back to the national committee for review, commenting, and voting depending on the stage. And so we have there in that stage an exchange between the technical committees and the national committees on drafts. And finally, once the process of votes and drafts is finished, then we go to the publication of the standards. We'll go more in details about the votes and draft process later on, but this is just to give you a snapshot of the global process. In order to better understand how it works, I propose you to take an example of one standard development and to go through the process for this standard as an example. So I propose you to have a look into a TC59 standard. TC59 is about performance of household and similar electrical appliances. And this is in specific, particularly a new standard that is the IEC 62849, which is about the evaluation of performance, the methods for evaluating the performance of mobile household robots. So this is, these robot vacuum cleaners. So first of all, in order to develop a standard, we have the first stage, which is to initiate the project start and to approve to develop such a standard. So this is a vote on what we call an NP, which is the new project. So this is exactly a new work item proposal. And what's happening? In that stage, the document is usually prepared by a P member. So there is some kind of a draft that can come from a national standardization body, or there can be maybe just a table of content that is prepared by a P member. And then the secretary receives that request to circulate a new work item proposal, and it reviews it and then forwards it to the central office. At central office, we circulate and open the vote system, and then the P members, they can vote and nominate experts. The approval criteria is a 2/3 majority and a minimum of 5 experts nominated into the group. The ballot time for an NP is 12 weeks usually. It can be shortened to 8 weeks by a committee decision, and also it can be even shortened to 4 weeks if there is only a table of content attached and not a full draft. And then once the ballot is closed, the secretary of the technical committee has to send out a report on the voting on the NP, which is called the RVN, and that has to be sent out 4 weeks after the closing of the ballot. So let's have a look on what is an NP. So this is an NP, and as you can see that document here, we have a reference number, but we have basically the proposer, the technical committee, we have the date of circulation and the closing date for the vote. And from there, afterwards, we have a description of the project. So we have a title for the standard, and then we have here a description of the scope here, and then we have a purpose and justification. And this is to describe the market relevance of the standard which is proposed to be developed. Then we have some target dates for the first CD and for the publication to be ready here, an estimated number of meetings and so on. If we have some other organizations that needs to be considered, then we have here relevant documents, liaison organizations, and need for coordination with our other TCs, and here we can have another TC that needs to be also consulted and engaged into that development. Then we have a proposal for a project leader here, and then later in the document here we have comments and recommendations from the TCSC offices, and then they also can have remarks. And from there, then together with that cover page, which we have just been through, then we can have here the draft. Here this was mentioned that there was only a table of contents, and you can see you have the table of content. You have a forward, you have here the scope, so then you have just a list, some information, and then a list of the main items are in the standard. And then we've been through the document, and this is the end of the document, this is the end of the NP. Once the ballot on that NP is closed, then the secretary gathers the results and circulate this RVN, which is the report, the result of voting on the NP. So we've got the date, and at that time, if the project is approved, there is a reference number which is defined. Then we have the voting results, who approved, who did not approve. And then we know that the proposal here is approved, and the new work item has been introduced in the work program. There also, we see that the project is assigned to a working group, the working group 16. We have a project leader here, and we have also here a project plan with planned dates for the delivery of the CD, of the CDV, the FDIS, and the international standard at the end. Then on the second page, we have the list of the experts that have been nominated. That will be really the core of the development group for that standard. And then on the following page, we have the table with all the voting results. So we have here the list of the P and O members for the TCs. It is stated whether they are P or O members there, here in the status. Then it's stated whether they have voted or not and approved and so on. So we have the vote results, and here we can see that this here, the project was approved. We have, again, the list of experts, and then as there was a draft, we have a first set of comments which are provided by the P members. Here we have these 2 pages of comments. So once the RVN has been circulated, this is when the clock starts ticking for the deadlines that have been committed by the project. So then from there, the experts in the working group, they meet together and they start to write a draft. When these experts, they feel that the draft is mature enough to be submitted to the P members for comments, then they circulate a CD, which is the committee draft. So this is really the consensus building period, and from there, when they circulate the CD is submitted for comment by the P members. So in order to process and submit the CD for comment, the project leader provides the draft to the secretary of the technical committee. The secretary reviews the draft and forwards it to the central office, and the central office circulates and opens the vote system. On that time, in the vote system, only the commenting function is available and not the vote function. And then the P members provide their comments. The commenting period is either 8, 12, or 16 weeks by decision of the committee. And then once the ballot is closed, there is the need to circulate the compilation of the comments that have been made on the document, and this is called the CD, to circulate that document. So let's have a look of what is a CD looking like. So this is the cover page of the CD, and we can see here that we have the project number, we have the date when the CD was circulated, and we have the closing date for commenting. We make reference to the NP and the RVN that were previously part of this project. And from there, we have just a title here. And please note that the 2 months commenting period. And following that cover page, we have the draft with a much more complete content here. You can see that now the draft on the left side has line numbers. And this is very useful for commenting. And then you can see there is already the foreword, an introduction, and then we find back the scope, normative references, terms and definitions. And so then we already have here a standard which is submitted for comments. And the standard is 14 pages, so we have been through all the pages. So that document is sent to the key members of the committee for commenting. Once the commenting period is closed, then we have all the comments, and the comments are provided to the secretary, and the secretary compiles the comments and sends out the compilation of comments, which is the CC document. So for that, we also have the CD that is, that was referenced to this, that was separated before here. Then we have the title of the standards, and we have here the decision that about the process, the future step on the process. And here it is announced that the revised committee draft will be distributed as a CDV, committee draft for vote, and with a target date which is proposed, which was at that time July 2015. Following that cover page, then we have the report of votes. Here it's just listed which team members have provided comments and which have not. And from there we have the list of all the comments. So in that list of comments here, you can see there on the right that, for example, the first comment was from Germany. Here you've got a reference to a line number, the number, your type of comment. The comment can be like this one, TE, which is technical. You can have ED for editorial comment and GE for general comment. Then you have the comments. Then you have a proposed change. So every time a national committee is submitting a comment, it is also requested to make a proposed change. And then this is the proposed change which is considered by the working group. So then the working group and the experts will receive all these comments, and they will have to fill in the last column, which is called observations of the secretariat. And here they will indicate whether they accept the comment or they reject the comment, or they maybe acknowledge or note the comment. Okay, so here we see we have all these comments, and we can see here that also they indicated the changes they made in the proposed change by using the track changes model. In that specific case, it's not required to do this, but at least it's required to what we call resolve the comments, which is provided in fact the answer whether the comment is accepted or rejected. So once the CC has been circulated and it is announced that the working group is working on the CDV, the working group will prepare the CDV draft. So they will take the CD that has been circulated, they will take all the comments that they received and the resolutions they made, whether they accept or not these comments, and then they will change and modify the draft accordingly. They will also continue maybe to work on the draft and to improve it on a general, in general. Then we come to the next stage, and this is the first time where it is also proposed to vote on the draft to know whether there is a consensus to approve it or not. So then that draft is mature enough to be submitted as for comments, but also for vote, and then this is what we call the CDV. So this is the committee draft for vote. So the draft is prepared by the project leader and the team and sent to the central office by the TC secretary. The draft is then at that stage we do the translation. So there is a translation time which is 6 weeks, and then once it has been translated, then the draft is circulated as received from the secretary and the team for comments and vote. The vote and commenting period is 12 weeks. During these 12 weeks here at Central Office, we will also work on that draft and make the editing of the draft. We will check whether the standard is properly structured, that we have a scope, that we have normative references, that we have terms and definitions, that we will check also that we don't have normative requirements into notes, and it's all these kind of things, many things we check. And then all the changes that are made into the document are always at Central Office, have to be considered as proposals, and they are always made in track changes mode in order that when the document is returned to the project team, they can see all the changes we propose into the document. And they have to go through and decide whether they would accept also these editorial changes. So once the ballot, so then the ballot timing is finished, then there is an acceptance criteria for the CDV. So the CDV needs a 2/3 majority of the votes, and also we need no more than a quarter of negative votes. Okay. So once the CDV is approved, then there is the need to send out what we call the RVC, which is also the result of vote on the CDV, and we have the deadline of 12 weeks after the closing of the CDV ballot to circulate the RVC. Also, if the CDV is approved and no technical changes are needed, then the project may proceed directly to publication. So let's have a look at a CDV. So this is a CDV form. So the cover form always contains a reference number. We have the date of circulation. Then we have the date of closing for the ballot. We state that it supersedes the CD and the CC documents of the for that project. Then you've got also here some other checkboxes that allow indicating whether it is the proposed standard is a horizontal one, or and also which functions are concerned into that standard. And then we have here the reference, and also here in that form, this is also where for the first time we indicate whether the document is submitted for parallel voting on CEDELEC or not. After that cover page, well, then we find back our document again with the table of content and the line numbers. And so here, this is the revised draft, which is expected to contain all the comments and the resolution of the comments on the CD. So we see that here the document is becoming longer, and we have now 21 pages into that document. And so once the ballot on that document is closed, then we have to circulate the result of votes, and the result of votes is that document here, and we see we have a number, we have the reference to the CDV number here, we still have the title, the description, and then here we see the decision that has been made for the next stage of the project, where it is stated here that the committee draft for vote will be registered as an FDIS by February 2016. After that cover page, we have the table of here on the vote column, which members have abstained, have approved with a yes, or have disapproved with a no. And you can see that we have 18 members voting. It is stated here. And we have 70 members in for that project. Japan did not approve here. Okay. And so we have a 94.4% of approval, the criteria being 66.7. So this is approved. And we have only one vote against, which is 4.2%. The limit is 25%. So this is also approved. And then we can see again all the comments that have been made, and they are already filled in here. So the working group has already worked to answer all the comments and indicate whether they will accept or reject the comments. So for example here, if we go down into that document and find and look for the Japanese comments, here are the Japanese comments. And here, for example, you can see that what they say that the document covers only so-called automatic battery-operated cleaners, that the scope is too vague. So here you can find some reasons and understanding why the Japanese would not agree on that. And then you can see here that the working group has accepted and rejected. So they have apparently accepted at least a good part of the comments from Japan. So based on these comments and whether they are accepted or rejected, then the working group continues to work on the draft and modify the CDV that has been circulated to integrate all these answers made on the comments here. At that stage, the difference between the future FDIS to be circulated and the CDV should be limited to the changes that have been accepted here into the comments. So from the ARBC, then we go to the next stage, which is the final vote on the documents. So then the working group prepares the FDIS, the final draft international standards, which is submitted to the National Committee for vote only. So then on the FDIS, we're not expecting, to have further comments. So there is the vote on the final draft international standards. The draft is prepared by the project leader and sent to central office by the TC secretary. Then there is a voting period of 6 weeks, and the acceptance criteria is 2/3 majority of the votes cast by the P members and no more than 1/4 of negative votes. All negative votes shall be justified by the technical reasons, and the deadline for sending the result of vote is 2 weeks after the closing of the ballot. So then we can have a look on the FDIS. And we can see the cover page. So again, we have the same type of information. And then we have the final draft. At that time, the draft has no more line numbers, and the draft has been edited by central office prior being submitted for vote. So what is here submitted for vote is what will be published. And so the P members, at that stage, they really approve and vote on the document that will be published. And from there, we can see the result of the vote. And here we can see the result of the vote. So we have the cover page. And then we have the table of the results. And we can see that at that time, we have 22 P members voting, and we have 22 P members in favor. So this means that the consensus, some consensus, was achieved because the Japan, who voted negatively on that document, now abstained. And then we have we can see here all the others P members, the ones that voted yes and the ones that abstained on the document. So now the document, the standard is ready to be published. So then after this, the next stage is the publication of the standard. And so we have been through the whole process. At this point, I would like to show a few additional slides to summarize the process. So in fact, we've been through the stages of the development process, and we see that we have 7 stages into the development process. There's the very first stage, which is called the preliminary work item. I didn't mention it in my example, but it is possible to publicly announce in the program of work of a technical committee that they intend to work in the future on a new project by registering on the program of work a preliminary work item, which is the PWI. Then we go for the NP, like I just showed. And on the NP we have a vote, and then we have the RVN documents. Then there is what we call the working draft, which is the draft which is developed internally into the working group. And there are several iterations of that working draft. And when that working draft is judged by the working group mature enough to be submitted for comments to the P members, then we have the CD. Following the CD, we have then the comments and the CC. Then we have the committee draft for vote, which is the CDV, where we have votes and comments, and then we circulate the RVC. Then we have the FDIS, together with the RVD, and at the end we have the international standard, which is published. So there we have quite a few documents, and all these documents, they have abbreviations. So just to make things clear, just here remind you, all these codes, this is some kind of a specific language, but we get used to it. And here you have the NP, which is the new work item proposal, and so on. So then you can see that you see that this PowerPoint, it can be also downloaded from the webinar. So if you want to keep also all these explanations and definitions for the abbreviations, just you have them here recorded. There's also the possibility to skip some of these stages in what we call a fast-track procedure. For example, if you have a standard which a draft that you already judge to be really mature, because it, I don't know, let's say let's talk about the USB standard that is developed by the USB Implementers Forum. When we want to integrate that into the IEC, we consider that that draft is already quite mature. And so then, for example, we can do a fast-track procedure for such kind of mature documents. In such a case, we can, first of all, we have to do the NP to approve the project and the start of the project, but then we can skip the CD stage and go directly to the CDV. And if the CDV is approved without any negative votes, then we can skip the FDIS and go directly to the IS. So this means that in 3 stages, we can go from the beginning to the end of a standards development project. So this is what we call the fast-track procedures. Then, along this process, we have time limits. So the time limits, they start to be calculated or counted once the RVN is circulated. And then there is a time limit of 12 months to circulate the CD, of 24 months to circulate the CDV, of 33 months to circulate the FDIS, and of 36 months to publish the standards. So these limits are monitored by the SMB, and if a project is exceeding these limits, then the SMB would ask to the secretary of the technical committee to justify why the project is delayed. There is another set of limits, which is, in fact, there are time limits in order to send out or to circulate the results of votes. Okay, so you can see that following the NP, there is a time limit of 4 weeks to circulate the RVN. There is a time limit of 4 weeks following the CD to circulate the compilation of comments. Following the CDV, there is a time limit of 12 weeks to circulate the RVC, and following the FDIS, there is a time limit of 2 weeks to circulate the RVD, but the RVD is automatically circulated by central office. Okay, so these limits here are quite important because this is one of the bases also of the transparency. It means that once a ballot is closed, you need then to share and inform all the P members about the votes and the comments on that ballot. So you need to provide that feedback, and this is why we have these time limits there at this stage. Okay, so this is what I wanted to present you today. I'm wondering, so if you have questions, you've got the possibility to ask questions there on the online by typing the questions. So please do not hesitate to ask some questions. Okay, so I had a first question that came in, which is, what is the difference between a working group and a VG, WG, which is a working group, and a PT, which is a project team? Basically, a working group is a group developing standards in for, I would say, a part or a sector of an industry. So a working group can handle several standards, and the working group is expected to be closed when it has finished its year's duty. A project team is a temporary structure, can only handle one standard, the development of one standard, and is automatically disbanded once the standard is published. So this is a much, shorter life organization, shorter life group. I hope I have answered that question. Then I have another question, which is it possible to have a second CD before the CDV? Yes, it's possible to have second, third, fourth CD. So it's possible to have, maybe up to 10 CDs if it's necessary. But if you need 10 CDs, it's too early to do a standard, maybe. So you can. What if the CDV is not approved? So if the CDV is not approved, then there is a discussion and a decision to do. Basically, usually the project would go back to the CD stage, and then there will be a more in-depth consensus work to be done at the CD stage. Then I have another question. Is there a statute for or official guidelines that stipulate the process explained in that presentation? Yes, everything is contained into the directives. So we have a document called the directives, and also another one which is the supplement, and everything is documented there, mainly in the clause 2 of the directives, part 1, and the supplements. Are there any differences for joint projects with ISO? Yes, there are some differences. We have different types of joint projects, but if we say this is a joint project where we have a joint working group and where we have also a vote on each side, then we have differences. First of all, the working group is made of experts from IEC and from ISO, and all the process that I have shown just now is moving forward on each side. This means that the NP is approved on the IEC and ISO side, the CD is commented on both sides, the CDV is voted on both sides, and the FDIS is voted on both sides. And then also, as we have the same ballot time and the same time limits, then the projects are coordinated, but there is still, the need to circulate the documents in both organizations. And at the end of such a project, then the standard has both IEC and ISO logos. In order to have the ISO logo, then the project needs to be approved and voted by the ISOP members and approved. Then what is the difference between a DC and a CD? Okay, so a CD is a committee draft and is a stage which is a part of a development process. A DC is a document for comment, and this is a DC can be used every time the technical committee wants to get some feedback or some input from its P members. So for example, I don't know, a question. So these are questions that are not really linked to a specific project. Like, for example, I don't know, should the technical committee take into account, I don't know, safety aspects on that subject, and then they can ask questions, some kind of general questions. Also, should the technical committee initiate a maintenance process for that standard and so on? This is the kind of question that can be asked into a DC. Then I have another question that came in, which is there, as there is possibility to have multiple CDs, is there no time limit for NWIPs to IS? No, there is a time limit. Basically, we have the first set of time limits that I showed. We have two types of time limits, in fact. The first type of time limits is, right, okay, these are these time limits here that I show now, which are the maximum times for the CD, CDV, FDIS, and publication are contained into the directives. Okay, otherwise, when you do the RVN, then you provide by yourself some time limits. So if I go back to the RVN, let's go back to the, all right, here's the RVN. So if we look at the RVN here, then this is where the project leader is proposing this time limit. And so this is where we have the time limits. And so, in fact, the project is setting himself its own time limits at that stage. And when we receive the RVN, we will register these time limits into our information system, and as per requests from the SMB, the central office in Geneva will check whether these limits are met or if the project is late. Okay. I see that I don't have any further additional questions that came in. So I think that we've been through the presentation. I'd like to thank everybody for attending this meeting and this webinar. I will really thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that this presentation has given you some more insight and understanding on the process we use in the IEC to develop standards. So I thank you very much, and I wish you a good continuation of your day. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.